49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco with Brian Renick. Like the show, subscribe. We appreciate all you guys listening. Big game, I think, this weekend for the Niners, Brian.
Yes.
This game typically, and we'll get into it. We got a couple things we want to talk about before, but this game typically would be a trap game, I feel like. And the betting line kind of started out that way because the betting line was like 3.5, 4 when this game initially opened. Let down after the Cowboys game, going to the East Coast, 1 o'clock start. The weather might be bad, but now it doesn't look like Deshaun Watson's going to play. And that line has gone up to 8 from what I've seen. So people are looking at this differently.
Yeah.
Money's probably coming in on the Niners. And it could have been a trap game. I guess I could have seen that, but now I don't believe that it will be. And we'll get into it. We'll get into this game where I think the Niners are going to be in good shape again. But we had a couple things we wanted to hit on, Brian, that you and I were just talking off the air and texting. Like a couple things, we'll read things and just want to hit on this or that. First one I want to talk about was the Steven Ruiz fella. Now, Steven Ruiz is, what is he? Does podcasts and writes for the Ringer.
Yeah.
Right?
So he is, he's a part of the Ringer's NFL coverage. He writes for the Ringer, and then he does a podcast with Nora Princiati called Dual Threat. And he's the main character on 49ers Twitter right now. And the reason being is because to start the season, so the big brouhaha is he does their quarterback rankings each week. And to start the season, he had Brock Purdy ranked as his number 32 quarterback, right? So he felt like Brock Purdy going into the season was the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. And since Brock Purdy's start to the season, he has elevated him up all the way to number 22, behind guys like Ryan Tannehill and Geno Smith and Russell Wilson and a handful of other guys, including CJ Stroud, the rookie. And it's funny. I just listened to the most recent episode of Dual Threat, which came out today. And I listened to it because there was a section where essentially he was trying to defend or explain his standings, because he's been getting calls from 49ers podcast, 49ers or Bay Area radio, the San Francisco Chronicle called him to get his take or whatever. And so it's been interesting. And I think the ire that he is getting is from 49er fans who have been so impressed with Brock Purdy in this start. And it really, really is just reflective to me. And I feel like we've talked about this a little bit to me, the disconnect between the level of Brock Purdy's play and how this 49ers offense has operated through the first 5 games, and the level of respect that Brock Purdy is getting from analysts and media to start the season. And that's really the conversation that I think is most interesting to have.
Well, Peter King had said something in his article too, that I read that sort of brought it more to my attention when Peter King is calling out on it and just the ridiculousness of it all, how well this guy's playing and to rank him like that. And I actually just pulled up his rankings. He's got Daniel Jones at 20th.
Yeah, that's the other one I can think of. Yeah.
Like, it's comical. I know he had Mac Jones ranked ahead of him recently.
Not anymore.
It's just crazy. You know what this is to me? Just because you can watch film and everybody can do the all 22 now doesn't mean you know what you're looking at. And I'm not saying I do. I'm not saying I'm going to look at a film and be like, oh yeah, this is a go route and he should have done this and the same. I don't know that stuff. I'm not saying that I do, but I just think you get a lot of these guys who watch it and just try to find things to feel like they're smarter than they are, or just they fall in love with these guys. Like Justin Herbert's a phenomenally talented quarterback, and I still think he's one of the upper echelon quarterbacks in the league. But the film nerds love him. Justin Herbert.
And Steven Ruiz loves him. Yeah.
Okay. That does not surprise me at all. Yeah. film people like Trevor Lawrence is a good example. Trevor Lawrence did a lot of good things this past weekend in London against the Bills. A lot of good things. He made one incredible throw and a touchdown pass. Really good plays, but he also turned the ball over twice in the red zone.
Yeah.
One of them was a blindside sack. The other one, he was kind of being careless with it. So they were talking about him in the game, like how great he's playing and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, he's playing well, but he's got 2 red zone turnovers. Like that has to count for something. Taking care of the football and making the right decisions has to count for something. And I've talked about it before. Like, I just think you have this group of people now who, unless a quarterback is rolling out and throwing a seed 40 yards downfield in the perfect spot, they're like, oh, they're just not that good. They're a system QB, or they wouldn't be good in another spot. And I was listening to a little bit of Stephen Ruiz today as I was researching this, and he was talking about, well, if you put this quarterback in an average offense, they wouldn't be as good. Well, of course not. If you put any quarterback in a bad spot, they wouldn't be as good. And I just wonder if some of these guys, if they were around in like the 80s and did this, they'd probably pick holes in Montana too.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they would find ways to because Montana wasn't the most physically gifted guy in the world, but he was poised. He was smart.
Yep.
And if you're going to put Mac Jones ahead of Brock Purdy, I'll just go on this. Forget about all the other million things you could say that Purdy's better than Mac Jones at. What about the poise?
Right.
What about the calmness? Mac Jones, he's letting the game blow up all over the place. He's throwing pick sixes. He's chucking the ball up there. Purdy, the moment's never too big. It's never too big. And I think any of your analytics or things that people are looking at, you have to look at the human element. And this guy is poised. This guy is smart. This guy's mechanics are really good. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to play point guard. He knows how to play in the system. He's smart. He's accurate. And I think a lot of national people are starting to come around to that now.
Yeah, and part of why I wanted to talk about this was to try and kind of discuss it and really figure out like where is this disconnect, because there really is a disconnect. There are those that are praising Brock Purdy, and there are more than just 49ers content creators and 49ers media members that are starting to praise him. There are former players, Kurt Bankert, who had a cup of coffee with the 49ers in 2022. JT O'Sullivan waxes poetic about Brock Purdy every week on the QB School. Guys that have played, Michael Irvin, guys that have played the position. Hell, Skip Bayless said that he's getting Tom Brady vibes from Brock Purdy. Now, granted, that is an inflammatory statement meant to drive engagement. I get that, but I also think that to a certain extent, I understand what he's talking about. And largely it has nothing to do with his physical ability and everything to do with what you just talked about, his poise, his pocket awareness, his pocket manipulation, his just enough mobility to be dangerous, right? Type play, but also the football IQ, knows where to go with the ball at all times. There's so much more to be looked at with Brock Purdy's game than just ball placement, accuracy, air yards, all that stuff. And I keep trying to figure out, like, why is this such a hot topic? Like, what is it about Brock Purdy specifically? And to me, it feels like this. If Trey Lance was doing exactly what Brock Purdy was doing right now, people would be falling all over themselves to talk about whether Trey Lance is the next great quarterback in the NFL. I don't think there would be any argument that he'd be in the top 10 already, because he's 6'4", he's 230, he's got a cannon arm, right? All those things. Brock Purdy was drafted with the last pick in the draft, and Trey Lance was drafted with the 3rd pick in the draft. And Justin Herbert was a top 10 pick, and Joe Burrow was a top 10 pick, and Lamar Jackson was a first-round pick. Tua Tagovailoa was a first-round pick. And it's almost like those that are working to diminish what Brock Purdy is doing are doing so because to admit that he is good is to admit that everybody missed on him when it comes to evaluating him coming out of Iowa State and all those things. And I genuinely think that's really what it is. It's more about it's more about ego than anything else. If I'm being perfectly honest, I genuinely think that's what it is. And here's the thing, I spent all offseason talking about how I still wanted to see Trey Lance get a chance in San Francisco because of the tantalizing potential that he had and the quote unquote higher ceiling that he had than Brock Purdy. And that had to do more with his draft status, what they gave up for him, his physical abilities, things like that. And then Brock Purdy came out in week 1 and I went, oh, okay. All right. I was wrong. I shouldn't even have really worried at all about, whether Brock Purdy was the right choice for this team or not. Again, based on his body of work last season, and the fact that Kyle Shanahan was so confident and his teammates were so confident. And so to me, it is less about trying to figure out, is Brock Purdy good, and more about, he can't be good because he was the last pick in the draft. And if the last pick in the draft can be this good, then the way that we evaluate quarterbacks is probably wrong. And I can't take that. I can't take that blow to the ego. I think that's what it is for a lot of these guys. And the other thing is, these, and I do find a ton of value in analytics. I'm not a type of guy that thinks that analytics are for the birds. I respect analytics. It's a piece of the puzzle. Yeah. But I also think that analytics in football are so much different than analytics in baseball. Baseball is such an individual sport, right? It is the pitcher against the batter. It is a sport with 3 true outcomes, right? When you talk about hitting, you're either going to strike out, you're going to walk, or you're going to get a hit, right? There are 3 true outcomes. And with analytics, with football is this is going to sound like, well, yeah, duh. Football is inherently a team sport, right? Probably the most team sport that that is popular now, right? Even in the NBA, even in the NBA, it's a team sport, but there are individual players that can take over a game and win a game for his team. There really isn't one guy that can take over in the NFL, because even if you think it's the quarterback, unless that quarterback takes over by running the ball every time he gets it from the center, and he's, rushing for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, no one is individually, but even then you've got your offensive line that is blocking for you. So I think when we look at this kind of stuff and we try and isolate the quarterback's performance, you lose a lot of what makes some of these quarterbacks so good. And I think that's the case with Brock Purdy.
And it seemed like people were waiting for him to turn into a pumpkin in that rough first half. He had that rough start on the Thursday night against the Giants. People were, see that? He almost threw an interception. He got lucky. It's going to happen. And then he came out and he played well in the second half. But the last 2 weeks, 20 for 21 against the Cardinals. He was phenomenal. And then you say, well, it was the Cardinals. Let's see. He's going against this Dallas defense now, who I don't want to say shut him down in the playoffs, but held them down compared to what they've been doing. Only 19.
He had his worst game agast Dallas.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Now it's Sunday night. It's national TV against this Dallas pass rush.
It's hard to say.
Oh man. Is he going to turn into a pumpkin? And not only did he not turn into a pumpkin, he was phenomenal in that game. A game where Christian McCaffrey only had 2.7 yards per carry. Purdy comes out with 252 yards or whatever it was, and 4 TD passes. The only reason they didn't have more is because they didn't have to play much longer than the end of the third quarter. Yeah. If he had to play that whole game, he might have had 5 or 6 touchdown passes and 350 yards. He was that good. He was that dominant. So I don't think he's going to turn into a pumpkin. I think there's going to be another test this week against a really good defense. But I really do believe what we're seeing here. This isn't a facade. And he's not a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type that's going to maybe put the team on his back every week. You don't have to be if you have intangibles and you have moxie and you have everything that he has. I really feel like the Niners have their franchise quarterback right now, and I don't know that I've ever really, really felt that way in a long time. So even with Garoppolo, it was like, yeah, but we'll see. So this is good. This is good. Be happy if you're a Niners fan.
Yes. Stop
All right,
waiting
Brian.
for him to turn into a pumpkin if you're a 49ers
Yeah,
fan.
I'm done with it. Right now, I'm ready for just him to play his next good game. That's out of my head right now. And if he plays like shit this weekend against Cleveland, I'll be like, all right, he's probably going to bounce back.
Yeah.
That's where I am with it right now. There's not worry for me in that regard.
Yep.
All right. So I was reading an article today from Dan Graziano on ESPN. It was just kind of week 6 buzz, and they were talking about different things around the league. He was talking about teams potentially that would add to the trade deadline. He brought up the Bills because the Bills have been decimated by injuries on the defensive side. Matt Milano and White and all those other guys. Like they're really in a tough spot. He said the Eagles could use some help in the secondary, and they're an aggressive team. He brought up the Panthers, which I thought was funny because, well, I guess they don't have a first-round pick, but they need receivers. Yeah. They might be looking to somebody. But then he said, don't rule out the possibility of the 49ers, as tremendous as they already look, adding a player if they think it can make a difference. The Niners have the biggest of goals for this season, and they were aggressive last year when running back Christian McCaffrey became available. Remember the Rams adding Bob Miller at the deadline a couple of years ago? If an opportunity for an impact guy like that comes along at the right cost, don't sleep on the Niners to do something. Yeah, if you've been paying attention to this regime, I think that's fair. Not only with the McCaffrey trade, which they did when they were 3-4, so it's not like they were playing great when they made that trade. But I always look back to the Emmanuel Sanders trade when the Niners had not lost a game to that point, but the offense was sputtering and they needed help, and they were aggressive to bring in Emmanuel Sanders. And if they don't do that, they probably don't get to the Super Bowl that year without him.
I agree.
So that he made a big difference there. So I absolutely think that they're going to be aggressive and get somebody. And I don't know who that person is. I don't know if it's going to be looking to upgrade or just if somebody is so good is available that they say, hey, we have our foot on the gas. This is our season. We're just going to add this piece. I don't know. I know you really want Surtain if and when the Broncos have a fire sale, which would be great. Yeah, if they can add a lockdown corner like that
after tonight.
I'm kind of thinking the same thing. If this turns
fire
ugly,
sale happens after tonight.
Yeah. Who's their right tackle? Maybe the Niners can trade for him. No, I'm kidding.
But you kid. But I believe their left tackle might end up being available, which Garrett Bowles at right tackle, I would think it would be an upgrade over Colt McKivitz. That's just me.
Yeah, it's weird with offensive line, right? Because you kind of need, for them to play together, and I don't know. I don't know if they would do anything there. And honestly, the offensive line has looked pretty good. I think. I mean, there's been some moments, but overall, it's not like you notice McKivitz out there getting beat every play. There's been a few reps, but I think overall he's done a good job. But I think they're going to be aggressive. And again, I don't know who that person is, but they understand the assignment. We keep talking about this. They know it's this year and maybe next year with this core. Players know it. The front office knows it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they bring somebody in that's going to make a big impact.
Yeah. And I think the question is not whether they would, but I think the more interesting question is where. Like, what position would they be looking for? And
they're so loaded. It's like,
right. And to me, I don't think there's anything outside of offensive line, but like you said, offensive line is a unit, right? And unless there is an injury on that line before the trade deadline, which Aaron Banks has been practicing this week, so I think he's going to play, which means that again, the same starting five. I don't think anywhere along on the offensive side of the ball would you be looking to add somebody. So now we're looking at the defensive side of the ball, and they brought in Randy Gregory, and I think that's a great move. It was a zero risk move, right? They're paying this guy $1 million, and all they had to give up was a 6th round pick, but they got Gregory and a 7th back. And with how bad Denver is, that 7th round pick is likely going to be very close to the 6th round pick that they gave up. Right. So I would venture to say that 6th round pick is probably going to end up being only 3, maybe 4 spots higher than that 7th round pick that they're getting back from Denver. I still think if someone like Brian Burns becomes available, you have to make that call because he's an absolute difference maker.
Oh yeah.
And both Gregory and Burns would essentially be 1-year rentals as is. Gregory's contract has no more guaranteed money on it after this season. So his contract's very similar to Christian McCaffrey's contract that they got last year, where they can decide to hold on to him and pay him I mean, it's a big contract. You know, he signed a 5 for 70, I believe. And so, you know, that's a significant contract. I would venture to say they probably aren't going to, but if he balls out, right, then you go, hey, we've got this talented pass rusher for $14 million next year or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But with Brian Burns, again, the reason he'd be available is because the Panthers aren't wanting to pay him what he wants. And I'm not saying that the 49ers would either, but similar to Von Miller, you bring in that guy. And can you imagine a defensive line with Brian Burns, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa? Like,
It's just not fair.
Wouldn't
be fair.
That would be unbelievable.
Right.
And Randy Gregory. Because Randy Gregory is still, although I think he'd be part of the deal, I would imagine. I would say you try and trade a 1 and Randy Gregory and some change for Brian Burns if that's what you want to do. But
that's a great point though, because he's an impact type dude, like you said, similar to the Von Miller trade with the Rams. You're trying to win the Super Bowl. You bring him in, he might be able to put you over the hump when you got to beat a Jalen Hurts, when you probably are going to have to beat a Mahomes or an Allen or a quarterback of, you know, that ilk in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like that can put you over, and that's who they should be looking at. So that's really interesting to me too. But I don't know. I kind of feel like Carolina's a little bit delusional. I don't know if they would trade or not. It sounds like they're trying to add. I don't know. I think that owner's a little bit crazy. It seems like he's really involved there.
Yeah, and I think they're trying the whole receiver thing, which is funny to me because they gave up DJ Moore to move up to get Bryce Young. That's part of the package. And now they're like, oh damn, like you actually need somebody to catch the ball if you're trying to develop a rookie quarterback. And that I think is the big aha moment that they've had, which was if we really like Bryce Young, we're not doing him any favors this year with the pass catchers that we have. We need to bring somebody in. I don't know what that looks like for them. You know, early in the season, like preseason, maybe into week 1, I was like, hey, what about Brandon Ayuk just straight up for Brian Burns? I'm not prepared to do that anymore because I think Brandon Ayuk's here long term, and I think he's more important to this team than Brian Burns would be. But
yeah,
I think if they make a move and it's an impact move, it's either at edge or corner. Those are the only 2 places where I feel like they could use an upgrade. But Diamador Lenore has been playing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And Charvarius Ward is solid as solid can be. And so does that look like a Pat Surtain? I mean, you do that knowing that that's a move for the future as well. But maybe what you're looking at is there's a team that is ready to, you know, to move on or to give up on an upgrade at slot, right? That I think that would be an upgrade there. Or if it's an upgrade on the outside, then you move Demo to the slot. But regardless, I think those are the 2 areas. If you're looking for the 49ers to make a move, or if they do make a move, I think it's going to be edge or cornerback. I don't really think I don't think any other move fits for what they want, what they need, or what they already have.
Yeah, unless, like you said, an injury happens to happen, and then that kind of changes the game. But knock on wood, we don't have to worry about that. All right, so this game this week, I was talking earlier. It did seem like maybe a little bit of a scary trap game when you thought Watson was going to play. Now I cannot be afraid with PJ Walker. Looks like he's going to start. Watson didn't practice. We're recording this on a Thursday. Watson did not practice again today. And he hasn't practiced since, I think, September 22nd. So the odds of him playing right now, I would think pretty slim.
Yeah.
So they enter week 6, these 2 teams. The top ranked defense in the league with 196.8 yards is the Browns, and the Niners ranked 3rd with 266.8 yards allowed per game.
Dang,
the Niners lead the league in scoring defense, 13.6, and the Browns are tied for 2nd, allowing 15 points per game. So this is going to be the first game since 2013, which was the Patriots and the Saints, featuring 2 teams that are each allowing 15 points or fewer in week 6 or later. So this is a big defensive game. And when you look at the Browns, the games that they had, week 1's always a fluke. Joe Burrow's been hurt, kind of playing like shit for most of the season, but they only allowed 3 points to Cincy in week 1. Burrow did look better last week, but week 1, only 3 points to Cincy. The defense only allowed 12 points to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh scored 26, but they had two defensive touchdowns. Other than a long pass to George Pickens in the game, Pittsburgh couldn't do anything in week 2 against the Browns. Then they hold Tennessee to 3. Then Baltimore puts up 28 on them, but there were some short fields there. There were some turnovers in that game that probably wouldn't have been as bad if Watson played. But you look at the numbers across the board here for the Browns. 3.8 yards per play. It's first. They've only forced 3 turnovers. That's one thing to me. That's because I think the Niners hold on to the ball. Obviously, they're fine. So that's one thing they haven't done a lot of. But they've only given up 37 first downs. Scoring percentage is 17.6. That's first in the league. We mentioned yards being first in the league. QB knockdowns, they have 20 of them. That's first in the league. And they had a bye. So they're first in that even
they've only played 4 games.
13 sacks, which was up there. It's not first, but it's up there after only playing 4 games. 30.3% pressure percentage. They're allowing just a 53.8 completion percentage. Yards per attempt rushing, 3.2. Points per drive, 0.92. All those are first. They've been a dominant unit so far. So again, this is going to be on the road. This is going to definitely be a test for the Niners. And if Watson was playing, I might say, if he hits on a couple throws or starts running around a little bit and it's a bad weather game or it's 13-10 type thing, something can happen. But I cannot be afraid, Brian, of PJ Walker, who's got a career of 57% completion, 5 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. If he starts, I can't be afraid of that because the Niners have their own defense that's pretty good.
Exactly. I am not concerned about this game in terms of the win column. I think the 49ers win this game, and I still think they cover the spread because I don't think this Cleveland offense is going to be able to do anything against the 49ers defense. What I'm concerned about is the 30-point streak, which I do think ends this weekend. We were talking prior to recording and we had tweeted at each other a little bit, but Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat tweeted out the Kyle Shanahan is 1-8 as a coordinator, or I will say as a play caller against a Jim Schwartz led defense. Now that was with Jim Schwartz as either a head coach or a defensive coordinator, and that was with Kyle Shanahan as just a coordinator. Because I don't think as the 49ers head coach, I don't think that he has played a Jim Schwartz defense. I could be wrong, but regardless, 1-8, it's not great. Not only was it 1-8, but he was 1-8, and his offenses have averaged less than 16 points a game.
He had 2 as a head coach that I found, 2 games against Schwartz.
Okay. And I think the interesting thing is, Jim Schwartz runs a very similar defense to the 49ers. In fact, the wide 9 that Chris Kasurik brought to San Francisco is a part of Jim Schwartz's legacy. Jim Schwartz learned under Jim Washburn, who brought the wide 9 to the NFL and then used that as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach. And so when the 49ers, when we knew that the 49ers were going to need a new defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz was actually the guy that I wanted them to get. I thought that he would be a perfect fit, specifically because, again, he runs a very similar defense. My apologies. I respect Jim Schwartz as a defensive coordinator, and that Cleveland defense is legit. And what's wild to me is it is largely all the same personnel as they had last year when they couldn't stop a nosebleed. And that just tells you and just goes to show, what kind of impact Jim Schwartz has had on this defense so far in Cleveland. And to me, the biggest concern is, and Kyle Shanahan said this, somebody asked him, why is it difficult to go against the Jim Schwartz defense? And he said, they rush the passer every snap. Just meaning that they basically tell their defensive line, look, get upfield as quick as possible towards the quarterback, right? If it's a run, collapse on the run, but pin your ears back and go get the quarterback. And they have arguably the best guy in the world at doing that, and that's Myles Garrett. And that guy terrifies me. And if I'm Jim Schwartz, I just put Myles Garrett over Colton McKivitz all game and say, go eat. And I would imagine that that's probably largely going to be something that happens. So that scares me. I think the one area of weakness for this team is their linebackers. Their linebackers play well downhill, so that's why they defend the run well. They don't defend well in the pass, and I think Kyle Shanahan's going to try his best to exploit that. But the other thing that this team has is two legitimate shutdown corners on the outside. So they play a lot of man coverage. They'll sprinkle in zone every once in a while, but they play a ton of man. Now, Brock Purdy has been elite against both man and zone coverage so far this season. I'm not worried about him being able to take care of the ball. What I'm worried about is him not being able to throw it because there's dudes in his face all game long. And so that to me is the biggest matchup is going to be this Cleveland defensive line against San Francisco offensive line. You know, you said earlier that they've largely held up, and that's true, but I think they've largely held up because so far this season, they've been getting rid of the ball really, really quickly. You know, you watch Brock Purdy, and it's a lot of 3-step, 5-step drops, and that ball is out. Not because he doesn't trust his offensive line, but just because he is processing so quickly that he's able to, you know, he knows what the defense is giving him, and he knows where he wants to go pre-snap, and it's great. But if it's gross weather-wise, that's again a concern to me. And so, yeah, I'm not worried about this 49ers defense being able to, you know, being able to take care of a PJ Walker or Dorian Thompson Robinson led Cleveland Browns offense that also doesn't have Nick Chubb. That's another big issue for them. You know, they are
banged up too.
Yeah, and they are just like the 49ers in that they would prefer to run the ball 100 times a game if that's what they could do. And Kyle Shanahan will run the ball. Well, the 49ers lead the league in percentage of run plays, which is at 54% right now. So my question is, this Cleveland Browns defense is great against the pass, and they're allowing less than 200 total yards a game. But I don't think they've faced a running attack the likes of which you get with San Francisco. Now they've played Tennessee and Derrick Henry, and they held them to 3 points. But Derrick Henry is not Christian McCaffrey, and Tennessee doesn't have the kind of depth at running back. Elijah Mitchell's back at practice, which means he'll probably suit up on Sunday. So you've got McCaffrey, you've got Mitchell, you've got Jordan Mason, you've got Juszczyk. I think this game, and I think Kyle Shanahan is probably going to, I would imagine, try very hard in that first quarter to establish the run and see where he gets with it. And if he doesn't, then I think he'll start to switch it up. And so it'll just be interesting to see. It's definitely a chess match. This is, to me, a much bigger test than that Dallas defense. I think that Dallas defense is good. I don't think it's as good as Cleveland. I also don't think it's as good as San Francisco. This is the best defense that this team has faced, and it's the biggest test for this offense so far this season. And I'm excited to see kind of how they rise to the occasion and see what it looks like. And if they put up 30 on this defense, it's over. It's over for the league. There's not another defense that's anywhere near as good as this one. And it's just, you know, they're just going to roll. Injuries,
I went up,
notwithstanding.
I went and looked because I saw what Jack said about those Jim Schwartz games. So I went back and looked because I don't know, I'm a loser, and that's what I do. I think about this stuff. But I found 8 games, so I think I'm missing one, maybe 2 in there. But 2020, Niners lost 25-20. The quarterbacks were CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins. 2017, 33-10. Quarterback was CJ Beathard. There's a theme here. 2014, when Schwartz was with Buffalo, Shanahan was with Cleveland, 24-10 with Brian Hoyer. Lost in 2013, Schwartz was with Detroit, 27-20 with RG3. 2010, 37-25 with McNabb and Grossman. And then I saw a couple games in 2008, 31-12 with Schaub, and then they won a game. The Texans did when Shanahan was offensive coordinator, 13-12 with Schaub. The one game that would have me a little bit concerned out of this bunch, got to go back to 2016, 25-15 and
There
that
it
Matt
is.
Ryan
There it is.
MVP
That's
year.
the one.
That's the one game where you're like, oh, okay. Because I look at the rest of these and I'm like,
yeah,
CJ, come on. Like, what are we really? I know it's a big sample size, but it's not like he was going into these games with even Garoppolo.
Right.
But the Matt Ryan one, you're like, okay, that's a statement game right there. But we'll see. We'll see. Like you said, this offense has been humming on all cylinders. And Brian, if they do hit 30 in this game, they're going to tie the 2006-2007 Patriots for 9 games in a row, which would be the 4th most. And then after that, it's the Broncos 2012-2013 at 11. The Patriots again 2010-11 at 13. And then the Rams, greatest show on turf, 99 and 2014 games. They did 30 plus in a row.
There was the Peyton Manning Broncos, I believe, had a stretch of 15 between 2 different seasons.
Oh, really? This is NFL Communications. Let's see if that's in there. Now, okay, so they're talking regular season games. So maybe did the Broncos have it in playoffs? Maybe.
I believe so. I believe it was to end one season and then the beginning of the next season.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to say too, we're talking about things to look for in this game. So McCaffrey scored a touchdown in 14 straight games now. If he gets another one, 15 ties O.J. Simpson and John Riggins for second all time, including the postseason. And the guy he's reaching for is Lenny Moore, who has 17 total. So that would be tying the record. And what all those guys have in common, and even the person he's tied with right now, Emmitt Smith, they're all in the Hall of Fame. And McCaffrey might be headed there as well. This Niners team is just full of people that when you look at them, you think maybe they're headed to the Hall of Fame. So listen, every week we're looking at these games and we're talking about another milestone. Purdy's got a bunch again that we just talked so much about Purdy. I didn't write those down, but Purdy and McCaffrey and what the defense is doing, there's just all these milestones constantly. It's just, this team is absolutely loaded. So this game is going to be a test for them, this offense. And I can't wait to see how they come through with it and how they do on it. But again, if it is a sloppy game for them, if it's not a crisp game, if Purdy does have a couple turnovers, if they do struggle, you know what? I don't care. I think they're going to bounce back the following week. So it's not one of those things where I think you have to take the temperature every quarter, every week and be like, oh, we told you. I don't think it's that anymore. I think this is consistently a very good offense with a very good quarterback. And one slip up, I said this last week, I'm not going crazy. If it happens, it happens. They'll bounce back in week 7.
And I don't expect them to have a sloppy game in that, their execution is sloppy, right? If it's sloppy, it's just going to be because the field is sloppy because it's raining. And I forgot to check. I don't know what the forecast looks like now, but I just go back to what we talked about last episode and the mindset that this team has, which is one game at a time. And I think they're so locked in, and they're so locked in on that idea of one game at a time. And I don't think they take any game on their schedule lightly, regardless of opponent. And that is a winner's mindset, because when you take teams lightly, especially in the NFL, is when you get got. And I don't think, I think they're so locked in. They're so locked in, not just on that mindset, but just so locked in on this goal of winning the Super Bowl. I think it's so important to not just Kyle Shanahan, but all those veteran leaders on that team, that I don't think there's anybody on that team that wouldn't keep another teammate, bring them back in line if they start to chirp a little bit about like future games or whatever. And so, I don't expect them to come out and be sloppy execution wise. This team always has penalties. I'm not sure what that's about. I think a lot of it has to do more with just all the motion and the intricacies of this offense and things like that. But I'm not worried about that. If they lose because the Cleveland Browns defense just put on an impressive showing. But I also don't think they're going to lose this game, because I don't think that Cleveland Browns offense is going to be able to do anything against this 49ers defense. And so I do think that 30-point streak dies, which is a bummer, because I would love to see that keep going. But I'm also wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't, because that's what this offense has been doing so far this season. And I'm just excited. I'm excited for the game. And, I'm excited to see them rise to this occasion, just like they've risen to every occasion since those lights turned on week 1.
Yeah, too many ways to kill you for them to have a really bad game on offense. You just for all those guys not to play well on the same days, the odds on that are slim. But so it looks like it's going to be on and off rain showers in Cleveland. So it could be a little wet. And it looks like it's going to rain on Saturday, so maybe the field is a little wet or whatever. So I agree with you. I didn't think they were going to hit 30 points last week, and they dropped 42. But
exactly.
For at least this week, I'm gonna also say that they're not gonna hit 30 and it's gonna end. But again, I don't think it matters with Cleveland's offense. So I'm gonna say they'll get to 24. I'll say the score is going to be 24-10 Niners.
I don't think that Cleveland can score. The Cleveland offense can score a touchdown against this 49ers defense with PJ Walker or Dorian Thompson-Robinson as the quarterback. So I will say that the 49ers win. I had 24 in my head right when you said it. That's 2 weeks in a row where we went with the same point total for the 49ers. But I'm going to say 24-6 San Francisco.
There you have it. 6-0, baby. That's where we're headed.
That's
and covering the spread. We both have them covering the spread.
Yes.
Which I think is 8 right now. So I'm getting way too into this betting stuff. I'm going to be asking you for money pretty soon. It's going to get pretty ugly. I'm going to say to the listeners, if you want to send us any money to help my gambling addiction,
we're going to set up a Patreon just so Al can continue to gamble.
So I can gamble. But no, I'm too cheap to ever. But I had a great week last week, dude. So I think I bet, I don't know, $22 or something over what I did. I did pretty well. So that's all I'll ever do. I won't do more than so far. I don't know, all the time I spend researching and looking at football, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. So, but again, talk to me in week 16 when I'm out on the corner begging for change.
In the hole.
I bet the house and the car.
Yeah. I don't do any gambling, but I do ESPN's, pick 'em, but I do it against the spread just because I think that's more of a challenge. And I am 2 games under 500 right now. So I'm actually pretty impressed with that because I think picking against the spread can be pretty difficult. And so I hope after this week that I'm over 500, but we'll see.
Unless you tease games and you pick 4 of them and you do the teasers and then you get that spread a little bit bigger. Or I like the money line bets. This is a real easy money line week because I feel like you got Miami's going to destroy Panthers.
Yes,
the Bills are going to destroy the Giants.
I'll tell you what, some of those spreads right now though are wild.
Really big. Yeah. So just kind of go on the money line and it's I don't know. Yeah, I have a problem, people. So yeah, anyway. Until next week. I'm crying that I lost everything next week. I'm Al, Brian. Thanks everybody.
Later.